Today on the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast, we are going to have General Michael Flynn. We're going to talk about a range of topics from Venezuela to a note that he put out that went viral. 40 million people read it. It's about 2026 being the year of accountability. He wants President Trump to hold people's feet to the fire. Going to bring in General Flynn here in just one moment, so get ready because, unfiltered.
Dennis Michael Lynch gives you his word, and he will never let you down. He will always fight for America.
The only one who really puts his money where his mouth is Dennis Michael Lynch.
Hello, I'm Dennis Michael Lynch, and I thank you for joining me today. I'm going to start off reading you something. This is what General Michael Flynn had to write on his X, and it went absolutely viral, and it is worth reading because this is going to be the crux of our conversation if you haven't read it already. It's not long. Let me get through it. It says, "Dear Mr. President, I know you are listening to We the People. This message is sent on behalf of every frustrated 79 million American who voted for you and millions more who refuse to be ignored. Therefore, we are designating 2026 as the year of accountability. Why now? Because the country is at a breaking point. Our freedoms are being chipped away in plain sight. Our government has been bloated, arrogant, and unaccountable. Public trust has not merely declined, it has been obliterated. Power has been stripped from citizens and hoarded by bureaucrats, agencies, and unelected elites. Those who call themselves leaders protect each other while the American people pay the price. Civic duty has vanished from classrooms, replaced by obedience and ideology. The family, once the backbone of this nation, has been systematically weakened and devalued. Enough is enough. At its core, this is not partisan. All Americans are demanding accountability, in all caps, by the way. We, the people, reject the lies, the gaslighting, the censorship, and the deliberate erosion of our lived reality over the past decade. We remember what was done. We know who did it. We are no longer willing to move on without consequences. The message is unmistakable and unstoppable. Americans demand accountability, again, all in caps. So, Mr. President, the question for you to answer is simple. Will you stand with the people, we the people, or will you protect the system that failed us? Make 2026 the year of accountability. We will stand with you through thick and thin, like we always have, but you must respect our wishes. If you don't, as our founders warned, the deep state concentration of power in government will lead to greater corruption and eventually tyranny, and your legacy in history will be tarnished beyond repair. Respectfully, one of the 79 million votes, and that is from Michael Flynn, General Michael Flynn. Let me bring in General Flynn right now. General Flynn, I appreciate you being with me here today. I know you're a very busy man, and I appreciate all that you have done for the country. I want to start off with that. My father was a 1-9 Marine. He passed last year, and he was a big General Mike Flynn fan, and I just want to let you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for all you do. And I'm very sorry that you had to go through the things that you had to go through. With that being said, you posted something 3 days ago on X, which I thought was extremely powerful because, you know, people are always afraid to toss anything at Trump because they're afraid they're going to lose followers or they're going to get attacked. And I don't think anybody could send a shiver down Mike Flynn's back. You put out a thing called the Accountability 2026 Pledge. Can you explain what that is and why it is that you felt obligated to put it out there for people?
Yeah. So first of all, Dennis, thanks very much. And as we spoke about, you know, we're big fans of you and everything that you speak about too. And, you know, it's very, very important time that all of us understand the sort of the threshold or the pinnacle or whatever word you want to use as to where America stands historically. And this is no longer a period of time where we can kid ourselves that we are sort of on the edge of losing everything, you know. And and I talk about where we're already down that path to a degree, historically, and I can talk to all the historical examples of all that. But that particular pledge, and this is really goes back to everything that I went through, everything that my family went through, and certainly, what President Trump has gone through. I mean, there's nobody that's been more brutalized, than me is him. He really. I mean, my family went through hell. His family, and all, all of his kids and everybody, and the sort of threats to his life, and somebody trying to kill him. So we know now from his second administration, because we learned a lot during the first administration, and I was out at the time, but I'm paying very close attention because I'm trying to figure out what the hell is going on, right? And so the second administration, thank God he won, because otherwise you and I wouldn't be having this conversation.
No.
So he wins, and right away I knew that Tulsi Gabbard had put together a team of people to start digging in to Russiagate, right? And so what Tulsi Gabbard did, and good for her for doing it, and she's doing some really, I think, superb work as the director of national intelligence. She came out last summer, and there's actually two things, and this was last summer. It's like June timeframe. Two things that she came out with. One was she said that there was clear foreign interference in our elections in the 2020 election. The other thing that she talked about, and she actually used the word treason, and then President Trump, used that word treason, conducted by Barack Obama, the former president of the United States, prior to Trump, the first Trump administration, where he was called out for committing treason. And and now we know, and the discussion, Dennis, was about a conspiracy to commit treason. And, so now it's like, when did the conspiracy start? And people talk about statutes of limitations and all this other business. A conspiracy never ends. And what we now know over the course of this past year, with just an incredible amount of evidence, we don't need any more evidence to tell us that there's foreign interference in our elections. And we don't need any more evidence to tell us that there was a conspiracy to undermine a duly elected president, meaning undermine the Constitution of the United States, and to thwart and usurp our Constitution, right? Our way of life, the United States of America. And it was done by a sitting president, in this case, President Barack Obama. So all that said, that all came out last summer. And in fact, Tulsi Gabbard said she had turned over much of that to the Department of Justice to basically get something done. So, okay. So that's 6 months ago. Okay, let's give him 5 months ago, right? And so what does Mike Flynn want? And from that time till now, what did Mike Flynn want? Personally, I want accountability, and I wanted to hear from our Department of Justice, and I wanted to hear from the president, particularly the president, but I really wanted to hear from our Department of Justice too, that we now have an ongoing investigation. We have secured a grand jury. And they can say, they don't have to say where the grand jury is, but if the grand jury's in Southern Florida, or if it's in Washington, the District of Columbia, if it's in Kansas, I don't care. But let us know, let the people of this country know that you're actually doing the job that we voted in Donald Trump to do, right? It's not me that made up the phrase deep state, right? Deep state was made up during the first Trump administration. And, Trump came in and said, we got to eliminate the deep state. Well, thank God that Trump won, because now we have an opportunity to really get after this issue of accountability, because you can reform organizations, you can move lines and boxes around on an organization chart. But if you don't hold people accountable for what they did to undermine the Constitution of the United States of America, a duly elected president, and frankly, the people that were around him that he chose to be on his team, and one of them is yours truly, they committed crimes. They committed the most egregious crimes that we can have committed against our country. So, that's the other day. And as I was going through the holidays, I'm saying, geez, man, we're a year into this thing, and and you got Venezuela, you got Russia, Ukraine, Middle East. So you got all these things going on, deportation, border secure. I don't know, I'm not an economist, but I just filled up my gas tank on my way home from the airport, Dennis, and the price of gas, here, at least on the western coast of Florida, is only maybe dropped like 25 cents. That's okay. So it's going down 25 cents, but it hadn't gone down that much. So I judge things based on what I pay when I have to fill up my gas tank, because I still got to fill up my gas tank. Okay. Right. So, but I'm not, I know that I'm in a different category because I spent 33 years of my life in the military and I get a retirement pay. And so there's people that are out there busting their chops, mostly young women with children who are single family moms, and they're trying to raise kids, and they're trying to do two jobs. So I talk to enough people, Dennis, around this country, and I have been around the country quite a bit in the last 4.5 years. And while Trump was going through hell in these various trials, and all of us were still, and people have told me, man, if he ever gets back into office, we have got to hold these people accountable. I went through the TSA line because I just told you before that I just got back from I was up in DC. I went through the TSA line today, and the guy at TSA, there's not that many people, where I was going through, and the guy at the TSA, I give him my ID card. We throw it the little machine. He looks at me. He goes, "Hey, sir." He goes, "How you doing, General?" And I said, "I'm doing great." I said, "How you doing?" He goes, "Boy," this is just some TSA guy, right? He goes, "Boy, I hope they do something. I hope President Trump does something." He goes, these people need to be arrested. I don't know this guy from Adam. But Dennis, I get that all the time from people. So
yeah. So let me jump in on something here because I don't want to forget it. General, I have to say to you, if there is one recurring theme that I hear all the time from all the different people that follow me on social media, I voted for Trump. I love Trump. I can't understand why nothing's happening. It's moving too slow. Right. Now, and I know that there is a process, right? There's the investigation, there's the indictment, there's the whole process that goes through. And I'm sure when it's happening to you, it probably feels like it's happening in super speed, but there is a process to it, right? And after a year, I think people are looking up and saying, like you just said, hey, my gas went down by 20 cents, but my health insurance went up by 2,000. And yeah, the border is secure, but I still got so many people still in this country that aren't deported. And yeah, you're talking about the fraud that's in, Somaliland.
Minnesota.
Yeah,
right.
But why am I still taking in 1 million people legally every single year? Why aren't you turning that off? And what in heaven's name is Pam Bondi doing? So when people see this and they're starting to get a bit frustrated, one of the things that we risk, other than people never getting the accountability that you're talking about, never getting the affordability that's needed in the women and the working people of this country, if he doesn't hold people accountable for the crimes they committed, at least indict them, I mean, people are going to lose faith in the system. They're not going to show up for the midterms. And and I know that come, the next election, if J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or whoever is the candidate doesn't win, these Democrats are going to come back and they're going to come after you again. They're going to come after people like me. They're going to come after all of us. And I mean, he's got to know that, right, sir?
Yeah. And so a couple of things, because you're hitting on some really, really super important points that I'm going to tell you millions of Americans, like I said in that letter that I posted, I'm one of 79 million that voted, right? That voted for you again, and again, right? So number one, we want transparency from our government. We want absolute transparency. I listened to, I think on the way home from the airport, I listened to 90 minutes of President Trump talking today to a GOP coalition convention or whatever they're doing, right? And you're hitting on he went there to sort of start the conversation about the midterms, because the numbers like 52 or 54 GOP that are retiring this year, we only have like a 2-seat majority right now in the Congress. So, and the norm is that if a president wins the midterm, he loses, right? That's kind of the norm. I think it's only happened in the last, I think Trump said it, like the last 50 or 60 years, it's only happened twice where they've kept the House. So we're in a really tough position. And unless people that did go out and vote, now there's going to be a lot of people that say, like me, I would still go and vote for Republicans because I don't want the lunatics on the left to do what they're going to do if they get back in charge. But one of the things that I want people to understand, the president is the only individual that takes the oath of office, and there's one word that is different than everybody else that takes the oath of office, and that word is preserve. So it's not only protect and defend the Constitution, but he also uses the word preserve the Constitution. So he has a duty and a responsibility to not only protect and defend like I took for many years, but he also has the duty and responsibility to preserve the Constitution. That's number one. The second thing is that the President of the United States is the chief law enforcement officer of the country. He's not only the president and the commander in chief, he's also the chief law enforcement officer for the country. Most people don't realize this, Dennis, but the Attorney General for the United States of America is not required to be a lawyer. It's required to be a leader. Okay. So, and a lot of people don't understand that. You're just going to go in there and you're going to run an organization. You got thousands of lawyers, right? You don't need to be a lawyer to run an organization. Hell, I was a commander of an organization of 20,000. I had an entire law firm that worked in that organization, and I would go to them for the law stuff, right? But what Trump, what he'll say sometimes, because this is just kind of his style, he'll say, we'll see what happens. And, the Department of Justice has got this. Well, I want then okay, Mr. President, great. Because I love you. I'm going to continue to support you, but I'm also going to continue to challenge you because I want our system of government to restore trust between the government and the people that it's supposed to serve. And I want accountability. And I want accountability for the fraud, waste, and abuse. I want accountability for the conspiracy. I want accountability for those who weaponized intelligence, weaponized, the political system, and basically did it in a way that was a crime. They conspired to commit a crime to undermine our way of life. And that's not me saying those kinds of things, Dennis. The president talks about that all the time. He even talked about it today.
But so, General, let me ask you this question because everybody would want to ask you this. I mean, you have a very unique perspective. You spent all those years at the Pentagon. You know how the Washington system works. You certainly know how the White House works. Why is it, even when you get somebody like Donald J. Trump, who has been shot at, they've tried to assassinate him twice that we know about, they try to strip him of his business, of his freedom, of his money, of his family. I mean, they've basically done everything to this man you could do to somebody. So obviously he's incentivized to have every single last person drop. Why is it that we can't get past the line? I mean, do we blame this on Trump that he kind of just got lazy and he's forgetting? Or do we say, hey, this is the system and he is now just another victim of it? What is going on in Washington, D.C. that we can't get things done? Because and I know this, sir. If you and I are walking down the street right now and somebody does something bad to us, we're either going to kick their ass or we're going to call the sheriff and the sheriff is going to come and lock them up. And there's not going to be any delays. Why isn't the same thing happening in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. You make me think about when you dial 911. We taught our kids if something happens, burn and we're down, whatever, here's how you dial 911. As soon as we could teach them how to do that, to get a cop to the house or to get the fire department to the house, right? Well, when the big picture is when you dial 911, it's the president of the United States that picks up that phone. And right now, the United States of America, we're at grave risk. We are really at grave risk. And so, Mr. President, if I'm talking to him, it's like we're at a 911 point in time. Now, here's what I do know, and I know this because I just came from Washington D.C. Actually, the president absolutely is going to hold people accountable for the election system. How he eventually does that, it's going to happen pretty soon because Arkansas starts their primaries in 2 months. Mm-hmm. So the machinery of elections is going to kick in here pretty soon. So the president is going to have to take some extraordinary measures to be able to fix the federal election system. That's number one. So he knows that he has to do that because if we don't get our election straight, Dennis, we're not going to have a country.
Nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters. The second thing is this business with Russiagate and Impeachmentgate and everything else, right? So this is where he's going to have to direct. He's going to have to do this, and he's going to have to be very directive. Now, I know that there is a grand jury. There have been subpoenas that have been issued I think we now know because I think Brennan has come out and said that he's joked about being a target of an investigation, right? Because the way lawyers talk, I'm told that there's a couple of dozen subpoenas issued. Now all the lawyers then lawyer up, or other guys, all the clients get lawyered up, and they start talking, and they start, are there deals being cut? All I want to know as an American, never mind as a former national security advisor and former senior intelligence officer for the Department of Defense, I want to know as an American citizen, is action being taken by our Department of Justice that will result in indictments and prosecutions and prison sentences? Because, and here's why, Dennis, here's why, because one of the principal guys that was at the pointy end of the spear, so to speak, was Jim Comey. And we screwed that up. We now, we the people, right? These are our representatives. We so screwed that up in the Eastern District of Virginia, and the case got thrown out. And that got thrown out along with what's her name? I think from
Letitia James.
James. I mean, so this was a no-brainer. This was a no-brainer. How could we screw that up? Now, trust, because here's another little piece. Because Trump, he griped about all the Epstein stuff. I have a nonprofit where we help children, right? We help children who are being sex trafficked, and I'm looking at this whole thing, and it's not a Democrat hoax. It's about children. It's about children. So put Epstein himself aside, which was a disgusting figure. But when Pam Bondi sat there and said, "We got it all," I looked at it on my desk. We got the big to-do at the White House where they're showing the binders and all this crap. And it ended up being the same thing that Obama put out. So again, we lost so much trust when Trump took office. I was super excited about it. I was like, "Oh my God, thank God! We're gonna see things happening at the speed of war." I call it, right? We're gonna see things happening at speed, and all of a sudden we started to see things. We're like, "Hey, shoot! These guys, they can't shoot themselves out of a paper bag," Yeah. And now, I don't want to be in general because there's a lot of good things happening. But this issue of accountability of those people who were trying to destroy our country, Dennis, because what's Mike Flynn's thing? Hey, I met Trump in the summer of 2015. And from that moment on, I have been in his camp, and I've worked very hard to help him get elected then in 2016. To get elected again in 2024, because I was in the midst of my own persecution during the 2020 campaign. But then I fought for 4 years on the whole, the conspiracy theory of stolen elections. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, look, folks, look, Mr. President, the people of this country gets back to what people are asking me all the time about. And, so I don't want people to tell us, "Oh, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. We're working really hard. There's a lot going on behind the scenes." I got that investigations, have to be discreet and protected, but just tell us that there's an investigation going on.
Yeah, General, you and I, before we hit the record button, we were talking about how you said you appreciate my work. And I said to you, "Yeah, you retweeted me." And what you retweeted, it was only about a week ago, is I got up, I had a 30-second video. I said, "This is going to be the shortest video of my life." I said, if nobody is indicted and nobody goes to prison, this administration, the rule of law, it's all full of shit. And, it went, they wrote articles about it in the Gateway Pundit about how viral it went. It was millions and millions of views. And if you take it all across all the social media, probably over 10 million views. And, I didn't mean disrespect by it to the president nor Pam Bondi or anything. What I was trying to do was voice frustration on hey, man, we've been giving you a lot of time. And what people sort of feel like, General, is that there is this uniparty, whatever you want to call it, the good guy network, where I don't even want to use names because people will hold it against me. But let's say you got a Republican and you got a Democrat, and for the sake of their C-SPAN X clips, they'll put up there and, let's say, for instance, you and I are on two different sides of the aisle. I'll say, "Michael Flynn, he's horrible. He's terrible." And then you're going to get up and you're going to say, "Dennis Michael Lynch, he's useless. He's garbage." And then meanwhile, when you and I see each other at Ruth Chris, we're going to shake hands. We're going to sit down. We're going to have a martini together. And we played the game. So a lot of times people think that nobody's being held accountable because at the end of the day, Mike, you come after me, I'm going to come after you, even if I got to make something up about you and you got to make something about me. So what we do is we have sort of like an unwritten agreement that you're not going to come after me, I'm going to come after you, but we got to say nasty things about each other for the sake of having our clips go viral.
Right.
Do you believe that that is the sort of thing that the whole Washington, D.C. complex is stuck in, and maybe Trump is a victim of that he just can't get out of?
Yeah, I do think that there's some of that. It has to be.
Okay.
You know, they use the word Washington, D.C. colleagues, right? My colleagues on the other side of the aisle. They're not your colleagues. They're your enemies. They're your sworn mortal enemies in most cases. They hate you. They hate Trump. You know, if you're on the left, if you're on the right, okay, you love the president. If you're, this current president, if you're on the left, you hate him, and you hate, in many cases, you hate America. You hate the American way of life, because there's a lot of them that are socialists. And they're ready to support Mamdani up in New York City. I think that the letter, just to talk about the scale of that letter going out. I mean, I have about probably on different social media platforms, I got about 3.5 million followers, and I appreciate every one of them. That letter in the first 24 hours had 20 million views. Full readings, and it's an easy. It's a one-page letter. It's and it's a simple thing to read. You kind of read it. Now it's close to 40. It's 40 to 50 million. So there is a scab that I picked. Okay, yes. And the American people are feeling it. And they're going, yeah, man. Well, yeah, because when a guy like me says something like that, and I said it in the letter, we're gonna be with you through thick and thin. But you got to know that if you don't do what you talked about in your 30-second clip the other day, then we don't have a functioning rule of law. Nobody trusts it. And now let me jump to the next most important thing that's going to happen, Dennis. Now we're talking about the midterms, because I listened to the president today in his 90-minute diatribe to this GOP summit or whatever, and it really is. He was really telling them, hey, guys, we got to get ready for these midterms, because it's not looking good. It's not looking good historically, the trends, and the fact that we got so many people retiring from the GOP. So if the president loses, or if the Republicans lose the House, maybe they lose the Senate too, but if they lose the House, what's going to happen? Are we going to see an impeachment? Are we going to, is the government going to shut down? So what I'm telling you is, and what does that have to do with? It has to do with turnout, because if the president of the United States, which I think Susie Wiles talked about, the president going on a campaign tour, a journey around the country again to do some campaigning for some of these people. Good, then that's fine. And there'll be people like me. I'll go out there. I'm going up to Michigan Monday night to do a big rally for a Republican who's running for senator, a gal who I know, Bernadette Smith. She's wonderful. And so, I'm going to go around and do what I can, because I have a platform. People trust what I say, and there's enough people that believe me to say, yeah, what Flynn says, fine. I got my those colleagues on the left, right? Yeah. So, but if we do not, and this is now between sort of now and I would say the next 90 days, if we don't see indictments in the next 90 days, so this is January 6th, right? Happy anniversary to a fake, insurrection. So, and to all those people and families that were destroyed, I feel so sorry for them. But between now and, January, February, March, maybe into before Easter, I think is the first Sunday of April this year, if we don't see some indictments, because what is going to happen is you get those indictments, and then the next thing you do, you're in court and you're doing this, you're doing that. And we already indicted Comey, and it failed for one guy. For one guy. Yeah. And with all of the team that Trump had put together, and it failed. I'm sorry, Pam Bondi, and I'm sorry, everybody else that's on Trump's team. It failed. And it pissed off people to no end. Oh, yeah. Especially me, because Comey, who gave me the highest medal that you can receive from the FBI, okay? I was awarded the highest award that you can get from the FBI. It's called the Director's Award. And 14 months later, they got me under a major investigation for counterintelligence, espionage, and all this bullshit. And I'm like, you SOB, Yeah. And he knows what he did. He knows what he did to give. I mean, again, the evidence is there. I was just going to say to give up stopping what they were going to go after with Hillary Clinton. The whole sending people into the White House. I mean, everything. We have it all. Trump has said we have it all. He actually said we have it all, even even during his first administration at the tail end. We have it all. He has said that phrase a bunch of times. If we have it all, then package it up and let's see some goddamn indictments, right?
Yeah, I want to ask you one more question about this, and then I want to shift to Venezuela because I know I don't have you for all that long. So the thought on this side here, General, and I've made videos about this, and they too go viral more than the other ones, is that I believe that there is a concerted effort on the right, whether it's the deep state, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'd like to just say some senators out loud, but I won't. And I truly believe they're just faking it. They're just faking it because they don't want to be the subject of that Truth Social venom that could come out. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be the subject of everybody unliking their pages. So they fake that they like Trump, and they're just trying to get through the process to run the clock out until this guy is gone. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing anything get done, because we've had the Senate, we've got the House. Grant you, we don't have 60 people in the Senate, but there seems to be no remorse on the right that we're not getting things done in this agenda. Here's Trump speaking to Congress, and I truly believe that the GOP side, half of the room, if not more, don't even care about him. They want to see him gone. They don't want to see J.D. Vance around. They want to see the whole MAGA thing die. So with that said, let me transition into Venezuela.
Let me just give you 30 seconds on that briefly, because I'll mention the name Thune. So today Trump mentioned a voter ID Act. Let's get our election system, voter ID Act. That's been on Thune's desk since April, okay? Since April. People that need to be confirmed, people that have been sent over by the administration, names that have gone through, committees to be confirmed for various jobs in the administration. There's hundreds of them, and it's up to Thune, who's he's the conservative leader of the Senate. Get these people confirmed. Give these people to Trump so he can have more people do the jobs that he wants to do. So, Thune.
And that's what I mean. I mean, perfect example of there's no good excuse why. And, I'm one of those people that I've always said, no, don't kill the filibuster. It's the low hanging fruit, but later on, it's the poisonous fruit. Don't do it. Now I sit here and I say to myself, if we don't get rid of the filibuster, we're never getting anything in. We're going to lose everything. We're going to lose our country completely. Now is the time. And I know everybody always makes it, General, like, this is the biggest election of our lifetime. This is the biggest year of our lifetime. But man, does it feel like that more often and more often. And, you brought up the thing about elections. That's where I was going into Venezuela. And I don't know what you can talk about and what you can't. So in advance, if it's something that you just don't want to talk about, you tell me. But, when I look at why we go into Venezuela, I mean, clearly it's not just because of drugs. Of course, it's going to be one of the reasons. Of course, oil and trying to stop our adversaries from taking the oil and the minerals and everything else. And look, Trump's a businessman. Everything for him is about the almighty dollar. But knowing Trump, General Flynn, if there's one thing that keeps him up at night, he wants to prove to the world that he won that 2020 election. It's the only thing that I think goes over his head to where he's like, if I don't close this out, I'm going to die an unhappy man. So there is Sidney Powell, when you go back and you look at the videos of her saying about Dominion and Venezuela, and it all ties back. I wonder if some of this isn't sort of like in a sort of gamemanship thing here. Marco Rubio said, sir, we could go in and get him. He's got the oil. He's got the minerals. China's trying to come in. We should probably go in. Pam Bondi says, we got the indictment on him. We could go in and get him. And somebody in that room raised their hand and said, and sir, by the way, through discovery, we may actually find out that 2020 was stolen. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where Trump says, go get him. Go get him now. Do you agree with that, or am I going conspiracy far?
No. That is a part of it. That is a big part of it, because there's a couple of things going on here. There has been an investigation. There is there's people appointed to look into this issue specifically, and particularly on Venezuela, but also foreign interference, meaning China. So there's a couple of things going on here. Yes, it is about the last administration, the fake Biden administration, that tried to destroy this country with millions of people, just incredible level of destruction, right? So this is all part of it, and it emanates from that part of the world, not just Venezuela, but Central America, South America. Okay, so why Venezuela? Why now? Well, it's not just the drugs. It's not just this organization that was a military arm of this Cartel del Solis, right? Which is what Maduro was the head of, this Tren de Aragua, right? This was like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, right? Black Lives Matter, the metaphor there, or the analogy there would be Maduro was the head of Cartel del Sol, which was kind of an equivalent to a Black Lives Matter, and TDA was like the Antifa, those soldiers on the ground inside of the United States, and they're cutting body parts off of people, right? They weren't following their orders. I mean, this was nuts. So you had that going on. You got the drug problem. You got massive amounts of money laundering going on. I mean, we're talking trillions of dollars here. Never mind what's happening in the rest of our country. Jesus, God help us. So, but this business about the election, which is so true, because what Sidney Powell talked about way back when, she was right on the money. Okay. And now we know. All right. Now we know. But there's another element here, Dennis, that's a very important aspect of Venezuela. China, Russia, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, there's other large scale drug cartels. The Cartel del Sol, which Maduro was in charge of, was like a mafia boss in charge of all of that, except you have these other adversarial countries, China and Russia, but particularly China, and I'll throw Cuba in there because Cuba's an operational arm. But China was developing beachfront property, in front of the United States of America. That's physically, and I mean in a big way. You're talking military operations, intelligence operations, economic development operations, and getting hold of one of the largest, not only oil, but largest rare earth element deposits in the world, to include uranium enrichment. Okay, so uranium is part of an element that exists in Venezuela. So you gotta take all this in. When you're sitting there with the president of the United States, and he's gathering all this information, part of the problem is do I trust everybody? Do I trust everybody that's coming in to tell me things? Is there somebody or some intelligence organization or some intelligence arm, agency, whatever, do they have a bias about what we want to do, right? So he's got to take all this information in, and he's going, okay, I got it. And I think that in a big way, personally, because the 2020 thing was personal to him, because he won. He won the 2020 election, hands down won it. And we now know it. He now knows it. He's seen plenty of evidence. I've seen evidence because I'm part of another, we do another investigation component of some of the things that I'm involved in with retired guys. So I've seen enough evidence that we have fed back into the government. And I'm going to tell you that Trump knows today, sitting here, you and I talking, Trump knows today that he's got them by the you-know-what. And now what he has to do is, if Maduro, whether there's a deal, whatever kind of thing that they set up with him, if Maduro sits there and says, yep, we did this and we've been stealing elections since 2005, because there's another guy in prison in Southern District of New York, and he's in Rikers right now. He's in a federal prison up in New York State in the Southern District, and he was Maduro's chief of intelligence. Okay. And he's been in prison now for a couple of years. He actually has testified, and he's provided affidavits, and they're public. The affidavits are public, but you got to really know where to look, right? I guess. And he's the guy that hired the chief technology officer for Smartmatic. He's the one that he was the head of intelligence for Venezuela for 10 years. He worked for both Chavez and Maduro. So this guy has an abundance of information, but it has taken an arm and a leg to get somebody from the government to go interview this guy. And I'm going to tell you, that's not been easy. It's not been an easy thing. And we've been pushing. So through his lawyer, we have done a lot of interviews. This has been going on now for 6 months, maybe longer now, probably closer to 8 months. But some of that information was fed back into now this is all public, fed back into the intelligence system, and then they do with it what they want, right? I mean, they're gonna take it's up to the government to act on whatever information they're given, to go test it, to go validate it, to verify it. And it looks like it's pretty damn good information. So the same thing with what Maduro will provide. And I think what Trump is going to do, and I'm speculating here a little bit, but I think what Trump will do is he's going to have to pay very close attention to what Maduro's talking about. Now, Maduro's already got a lawyer, so maybe Maduro will be smart. Who knows? And say I'm not going to say nothing, right? We'll see what they come up with, because they definitely have sufficient evidence to hold him for a long time. But if he comes out and says to Trump or to DOJ, to the prosecutors, say, "Yep, we actually were involved in the 2020 election. We've been involved in your elections for a long time." The problem, and this gets back to these other people in Congress, Dennis. Okay, this is what irritates me, and this is why the people of our country, many of them, don't trust the people in our government right now. And I'm talking about those duly elected, right? Well, why aren't a lot more of them screaming about our stolen elections? Why aren't more of them screaming about the information that has already been put out? It's out there publicly. People can go to my X post. I posted something, I think it was either last night or this morning, about a whistleblower that basically gave information during the previous Trump administration. And then, and I think I said, in fact, I don't have it in front of me, but that the CIA and leaders in the CIA lied to the president of the United States, at that time was President Trump, about foreign interference by China in our elections. Now, when I say China's doing this through a cutout, and that cutout is Venezuela. So these are the elements that that the president is aware of. So Venezuela, I don't know what's going to happen in Venezuela. It's dicey right now. It is dicey. There's no doubt about it. Rick Scott today, Senator Rick Scott from Florida, he put out a thing and said, "Hey, Delcy Rodriguez isn't a duly elected president. She's another thug." I mean, essentially, I reposted that because he's right. So yeah. I don't know what's going to happen in Venezuela. Regime changes typically don't work. We are expending resources to put an armada down there. The brilliance of our very exquisite special operations forces and the way that they conducted that mission the other night was extraordinary. It was just awesome to watch and to because I've been part of that organization and I know how they operate, and the secrecy, everything was wonderful. And thank God we didn't lose anybody. But I don't want to say that that's easy. It's complex, but that's a given. We expect our military to operate at a very high standard. Okay. So do it, execute, boom, done. Guy's captured. He's brought back. He could have easily been killed. But now the hard part, Dennis, is what's next? Yeah. What's next? And is it not just getting Maduro to talk about stolen elections? Well, is China and Russia going to continue to have beachfront property in front of us? Because I can tell you, because I know I've been in this argument with very sophisticated people. Putin in Ukraine, was highly irritated because NATO was encroaching on Russia, the Russian Federation. So, and he was told back in the 90s during the Budapest Accords, there'd be no more encroachment of NATO on the Russian Federation, none. And at that time we had 16 countries. Now we've got I don't know what the number is. It's probably like 40, but but that encroachment has come into, and you can use the same word, beachfront property on Russia, right? So Putin's standing there going, "Hey, don't put any more, you already agreed to this. You lied to us because now you're talking about bringing Ukraine into NATO. Bullshit. I can't have this." So now you flip the script here a bit, and you got Venezuela. So we're saying here, no, we don't want this. We don't want Russia. We don't want China. We don't want Venezuela, conducting these nefarious operations against the United States of America, right? I mean, and so I want people to think at another level here, because I just took everybody to another level. That's called geostrategic politics, all right, at its finest, when you start thinking like that. Because if you don't connect these things, and I do know that Trump does this, but I'm not sure that everybody around him is on that same wavelength, okay? Because if we're going to say, Putin, stop, doing what you're doing, Putin's going to say, NATO, stop encroaching on our federation. You told me you weren't going to do it in 1994. You've continued to do it, and I'm threatened. Our way of life is threatened because that's the way Putin looks at it. Right. Like him or not, doesn't matter. So now you take it to Venezuela. Hey, we don't like Maduro. We don't like what he's doing. We're looking at it and we're going, geez, you got China and you got Russia, two formidable nuclear powers, and they have basing there. They have huge intelligence operations that emanate from Venezuela. They do, and Trump has seen all that, and so it's kind of like, okay, I don't want those guys there. Dennis, 70% of U.S. trade, 70% of U.S. trade goes through the Panama Canal. So if you don't control the Caribbean islands and the straits, the critical straits, the main one is between Grenada and Caracas, basically, and Venezuela, the main strait down to the south. If you don't control that, and you allow China to control Venezuela, and you allow China to control, and Russia to control Cuba and these critical straits, the Gulf of America, right? At least on this coast, because believe me, it's tougher on the West Coast because it's the Pacific. It's much more wide open. It is the Wild West in the Pacific side of the Panama Canal. And China, we know from the last 4 years, the Biden administration was allowing China to build basically to create bridging and port facilities in Panama. So again, this is another level of thinking. So you can't just go Venezuela, Maduro, drugs. No, what you've got to do is you've got to say, look, how is the world shaping up here, right? I don't want these guys in our neighborhood. And frankly, personally, I don't want the United States in the neighborhood of Eastern Europe right now. I don't. We're spending, I don't know, $500 billion, maybe more, probably more, for a guy who's a dictator, Zelensky. He's a criminal. He's a criminal. Trust me. The corruption in that country is outrageous. We have a $42 billion civil case filed against the government of Ukraine and people right here in the United States of America. Okay, that's been briefed to the Department of Justice. That's a bit of a sidebar, but all this shit, excuse my Irish, matters because you got to bring it all together. So when Trump is sitting there and he's being briefed, and he's having this picture of Venezuela laid out, I am hopeful, and I believe, because he's got smart people there, that they lay out these kinds of things. Trump, I can tell you, from an intellectual standpoint and an intuitive standpoint, and just a guy who's been around the world a bit, and he's been the president, he understands everything that I just said. But the president has a lot on his plate, so he's got to have people that are like, okay, we got to massage this beast here, because otherwise, what we don't want to have happen is we don't want to have the same thing continue to occur in Venezuela. We can't have Venezuela just turn into a crime scene, because it is. Right. And the people that are running it, the two people that are running it, basically this Delcy Rodriguez, this woman, she's not an elected representative. She's just basically another thug.
Yeah.
She actually has a background and a record or a track record of being actually more dangerous than Maduro.
I question for you, the way that you just outlined that whole thing and explained it, I listened to it as if I were the president and you were outlining something for me. Is that typically the way that the president is informed, in the way that you just informed it, with detail, connecting the dots, going around, versus just saying, hey, we got to go get him, there's a lot of drugs? Is that typically the way that the president gets briefed? Yeah. So the answer is yes, should be. You hope so. I want it to be that way. Yeah. Because I'm sitting here, in my kitchen talking to you, about these kinds of things, that there are people that are in there. Stephen Miller's one of them, who I think he's a brilliant strategic mind that will lay these kinds of things out. And Trump has had enough information given to him for years now that he does understand this. But back to your original point, Dennis, about the elections and how Trump has personally taken, like, man, I got to get these bastards, right? Yeah. And this is a way to do it. He's a human being. Yes. He's a human being. He's got to believe that. I feel that way. I'm like, yes, now we're gonna stick it in the mainstream media's eyes. We're gonna stick it in the left's eyes. All this nonsense about conspiracy theorists. I've been called every name in the book, but conspiracy theory is like, okay, badge of honor. You mentioned Sidney Powell. I love her. She's vindicated because of what we now have exposed, even without Maduro. Yeah. So now that we have Maduro, the exposure of what's going to happen, but the 60,000 foot geostrategic level has other, adversarial elements, mainly Putin and Xi.
And those guys are going to have a voice. You know, Delcy Rodriguez, her voice doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. She gets out there. They'll put her out there as a, say something here. Here's what you're going to say. But these are powerful, powerful entities, and they see a world. They actually see a 21st century that does not have a global superpower called the United States of America. Both those countries, and I know that. I know that for a fact because I've seen and read and listened to enough of their principal guys that are working for their leaders say, but now that said, what does China want? China wants to be that global superpower. Okay?
Well, it's amazing you say that because I know I abused my time with you. So I have one last question. As a general, when you look, what do you see as the number one threat to the United States in the, let's call it the short, long term, if you will, in the sense that, is it terrorism taking place here domestically? Is it China, Russia, Iran coming together as one? Is it our inability to, get AI up to snuff like China? What is the number one thing? If I were the president and you were there and you were my main guy, and I said, General, what do I have to worry about most? What would your answer be?
In 1838, Abraham Lincoln gave what's called the Lyceum speech. And I'll cut to the chase on the part that I really have honed in on. He said that no enemy will take a drink from the Ohio with a Bonaparte for a commander, nor take a step on the Blue Ridge. Never will that happen. He says, if America dies, it will die by its own suicide. Okay? He said that in 1838, and I think he was like 27 or 28 years old, and it had to do with the potential rise of anarchy in the state of Missouri at that time. And I'm not even sure if Missouri was a state, but they were coming into the United States. That's my greatest concern, is that we will die by our own suicide, as Lincoln warned us during that period of time, because no foe can beat us. I'm telling you, no foe can beat us. Now, they can fire nuclear missiles, and nobody right now, I think, will go there, although we're talking about nukes over in Ukraine more than I've ever heard. I don't think anybody that has a nuke, any nation state that has a nuke, is ready to do that. But the lack of trust in this country right now between we the people and those who we duly appoint, who we elect into office, that lack of trust is just it's gone. It's just obliterated. I talk about that in the letter of accountability. That's how we will disintegrate. There's studies on the rise and fall of empires, and in one particular study, which is one that I've read quite a bit, the last three stages of the fall of empires, and I'm talking about, these are studies of every empire that ever existed, right? Athenian Empire, Roman Empire, British, etc. So the last three stages, the first is complacency, the next is apathy, and the third is obedience, meaning slavery. Okay? So I think that where the United States of America is over the long term is we're somewhere between complacency and apathy. Okay? Now, can we rise out of that? Yeah. And how do we rise out of that? We rise out of that because to come out of slavery, you need a spiritual awakening. Okay? That's the first two stages, is slavery and a spiritual awakening, and then you have leaders that emerge. Okay? So I'm taking you guys, your audience, through a study that was done, very detailed study, and this idea of a spiritual awakening, where I think we're between complacency and apathy right now, which is a downward trend, right? I think we need a spiritual awakening in this country. I really firmly believe that. Now, as a military guy, we still need to keep, our defense, and we need to have a strong defense. The best way to preserve peace is to have a strong defense. George Washington, right? So, we still always need that. It doesn't mean that we have to launch it everywhere. It just means that we have to have it. And so I'm all for that. As a thinker, as a strategic thinker, and somebody who deeply loves this country and has studied American history, warfare, that's what I do for a living. This is what drives me. I suck at golf. The point that I'm making here is that we need a spiritual awakening in this country. And that spiritual awakening it can start with President Trump, and I think that he found a little bit of spiritual awakening after, being nipped in the ear, being shot in the head, essentially, right? And so he has to continue to kind of uplift this country. And he does talk positively all the time. He talks about all the great things that we're doing, but he's going to have to drive some of that into the fiber and fabric of the people of this country that desperately want our country to survive, to succeed, to thrive. And that spiritual awakening is still very possible there. Dennis Michael Lynch, right? I mean, and it's not just some priest who talks right or some pastor. It's leaders. Leaders in this country have to come and step up. And I get upset sometimes when I meet guys and that I know I thought were great leaders in our military, who I still know, and they don't want to do nothing. It's like, hey, don't you see what's happening? Yeah, but I ain't going to get involved in that political stuff because you know why? Look at what they did to you, Flynn, right? So okay, they picked the wrong Irishman, is what I tell them. And so for me and my family, we got through a horrendous persecution, but we all know our family, my family, going back to our grandfathers who both came over from Ireland, our family is all about the military. Our legacy in our family is military. We all serve military. We love the military. And I have a son that's serving. So, I mean, we're a family of service, but we're also a family of true believers in the fabric of our country, because we had it beat into us in some cases, right? But we were designed in our family, at least in this Irish Catholic family that I'm from, to love our country. And now you start to look at how elements in our country are attacking those who love this country, right? And they are going after those who love this country, and I mean in really nasty ways. And they'll try to put you in prison, right? If you're trying to protect pieces of the Constitution, election rights, civil rights. I mean, geez whiz. So anyway, I mean, I believe that for America to survive and to thrive and to get kicked back into high gear and go back to where we are a thriving nation and get out of this complacency attitude that we have at times, is we must have this spiritual awakening. And spiritual awakening doesn't mean, a complete return to God and all that kind of business and the values and principles that our Constitution was drafted and created on, and our country was created on, but it's actually leadership, and it's leadership that loves America. Because there are people, on the left that are in politics that they denigrate America. They talk about the America, our Constitution is out of date. I mean, come on, really? So anyway.
General Flynn, last statement out of me is, Ben Carson had reached out to me during 2016 and asked if I would come down, and this is back when my big Fox days. He asked me if I would get him ready for debate prep against Trump in terms of immigration. And I did. And I went down there, even though I told him I was going to vote for Trump. And he said, I don't care. Will you do it? And I said, yeah, because I thought maybe he'd be the vice president. And he said to me, if you had one bit of advice of what I should say there on the stage, what would it be? Now, I know he was asking me about immigration, but I said to him, I would say to the camera, I'm in love with my country. Not I love my country. I'm in love with my country, because it's a different way of saying it. And it's very passionate and very intimate. He didn't listen to me, but I say that to you because I truly believe that. I think that there has to be a spiritual awakening, and the love for America has to be shown more than what looks like a good photo op. And I'm not trying to say that that's what Trump does, but I mean, there has to be this next level of love for the country. And I agree with everything you said, sir. I took up more of your time than I was supposed to.
I appreciate it. Let me finish with this, because you are so right. And what do people like? They like people who are authentic. They like people who are humble. They like people who are willing to admit that, I don't get it right all the time, right? But they want people to be passionate about what they believe in.
Yeah.
And that's, you said about immigration, with Ben Carson, right? There's millions of people that want to come to this country because it's still this beacon of light, this true North Star that's up there in the sky, and somebody in Africa or the Middle East or Europe or Asia is looking at that true North Star, and they're looking at that bright light in the sky, and they're going, God, I got to figure out a way to get my family there. I'm going to get on a boat to go there, right? And I'm going to hazard the oceans to get there. I mean, there's something about America that's still, like, it's like a heartbeat, and people can hear it all over the world. And that heartbeat is a heartbeat of freedom. And let me tell you, the people in Iran, for example, it's not about the Ayatollah, it's about freedom. And people want freedom. We are designed, we're birthed, to be free, right? I mean, so that's what America is about. And I think that you can't fake that. And that's why I do think that this idea of a spiritual awakening is something that our country is going to have to go through. In the short term, Dennis, I'm not sure about what's going to happen. In the long term, I do believe that God wins.
Think about how many people, General Flynn, take for granted what you just said America is all about. It's a shame. All right, I found an incredible amount of value in that interview with General Flynn. Let me give you a couple of things that you need to know if you want to visit him. First of all, his website, generalflynn.com. That's FLYNN, generalflynn.com. It will give you all the links to his social media. He also has a Substack, substack.com/@GenFlynn, GenFlynn. Give this man a follow on X. He is at Gen Flynn, I believe, right? Is that what it is? Is that what he is? Yes, at Gen Flynn. He follows me. He's a good man. And now I follow him. Just going to do it right now. Follow back. Until the next time, may God bless you, our troops, our president, General Flynn, and his entire family. We'll talk to you soon.
Get the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast every day by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and download the DMail News app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store for breaking news, merchandise, films, exclusive content, and team DMail.